So my name is Alex Corey, and I work for GCAP, the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential. And I primarily train teachers kindergarten through 12th grade on teaching comprehensive sex education and youth violence prevention curricula. So at GCAP, our mission is to improve the overall health and well-being of young people in Georgia to ensure a more powerful future for us all. We have 5 focus areas, so they include comprehensive sex ed, which is where I work. We have parent engagement, and that includes our parent toolkit, which I'll talk about a little later. We have a teen pregnancy prevention focus that mainly focuses on repeat teen pregnancies. We also have our youth empowerment focus, so that includes our Youth Empowerment Summit that's coming up in November. And then we also have physical activity and nutrition. So with that one, we go into elementary schools and we help them build garden beds, and they can plant and grow vegetables. And so the hope is that, for example, they plant a carrot at school and they water it and they watch it grow, and then they get to try it at school. We usually have a chef come in and cook them whatever vegetables they've grown in their garden. And then the child will be at the store with their parent or caregiver, and they'll say, hey, I just grew a carrot at school and this person cooked it and I really liked it. Can we get some carrots for my lunch? And so the hope is that that will encourage future healthy decisions. But today we're going to be talking about how to talk to your teens about sensitive subjects. So that includes anything from sex to domestic violence, healthy relationships, anything that's kind of those, they're not so natural, and sometimes they can feel awkward and uncomfortable. So I'm going to give you some skills to really have these conversations. So we'll discuss some health outcomes that affect young people in Georgia. We'll talk about some myths about communicating with youth versus what research actually shows. And then finally, we'll explore some techniques on ways to begin that communication, and that includes our parent toolkit. So in Georgia, we have the 4th highest repeat teen pregnancy rate and the 18th highest teen birth rate in the nation. We're the 8th highest obesity rate for youth that are from the ages of 10 to 17. We know that teens who are physically or sexually abused are 6 times more at risk for an unintended pregnancy, and they're 2 times as likely to contract an STI or a sexually transmitted infection. And then finally, suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death among Georgians aged 10 to 24. So we know that Georgia's young people need solutions. There are also some negative health trends having to do with adolescent health. So that includes 28% of high school students that are currently using tobacco products. 1 in 3 teens are a victim of physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner. 1 in 8 adolescents are diagnosed with depression each year. And then, as we said earlier, Georgia is 18th on teen birth rates. So we see all of these statistics, and so we know that there are problems, and we know that teens are in unhealthy relationships and that they are making unhealthy decisions and risky behaviors. And we also know that they are having sex. So how do we talk about this? How do we instill our own values? And how do we try to kind of reverse some of these trends? Some common myths about the talk is that my child is too young to talk about sex or healthy relationships or domestic violence. Another one is people say, well, I've already had the talk with my child. I have a friend who she told her daughter, so everyone, whenever they find out what I do, of course, they want to talk to me about how to talk to their kids. And she said, well, when my daughter started her period, I just told her, you can get pregnant now, right? And her daughter was like, yeah. And she said, okay, well, no. And so that was their talk. And so she really always says, like, I've already had the talk with my child. There's also people think my child will learn what's needed in school. And while we are trying to teach kids in school and get that into more counties in Georgia, we know that not every county teaches sex education. And also, whenever teachers are teaching sex education, they're not including their own personal values. And so that's why it's important for young people to get these values from their caregivers, from the adults in their lives. Some people say, I just don't even know what to say to my child. I don't know where to start. And so we'll look at some door openers and some teachable moments in a little bit. Others say, I don't know how to bring up this subject. Or I'm afraid that I'll tell my child too much or not enough. I'm so scared that I'll give, the wrong information. Some people think that if they give information to their child, then they might try it. Some people say that their child already knows how to avoid teen pregnancy or how to avoid unhealthy relationships. Some people say that they're not worried because they already taught their child how to say no to sex or how to avoid abusive relationships. And then finally, some people just think their child does not listen to them, that they are not a voice in their child's life. So let's look at what the research shows compared to all of these myths that we so frequently hear. Research shows that most parents and youth are in favor of youth being educated about healthy relationships, about boundaries, and about sex. It also shows that educating a young person about risky behaviors increases the knowledge and awareness, and it decreases the likelihood that they will engage in these risky behaviors. And it also increases this responsible behavior. So we often focus on building knowledge, attitudes, and skills. So the hope is that with education, the attitude will change, and then finally comes that skill piece of actually acting it out. So how do we start the talk? And the talk can be about any sensitive topic. It does not just have to be about sex or about domestic violence. It could be about anything that's going on in your child's life. So some people feel like Ross from Friends, like, oh no, I do not know what to do. Some people feel like this, of like, oh, do I really have to do this? And then some people feel like Adam Levine, just let me hide, let me let someone else handle that. But these feelings are all normal. So what do we say? How do we even approach any of these topics? Here are a few tips. The first is to choose a good time. So one of my favorites is whenever you're in the car or whenever your child is focused on something else, and so their brain kind of shuts off that, like, do I really want to have this conversation with my parent because they're focused on like building Legos or, playing with a Barbie or whatever that might look like. That's always a good time because they're not as focused on, like, it's not so awkward just sitting face to face, like, let me talk to you about this, where that could get awkward. Or the car is a great time because you're just sitting in the car, you're trapped, they have nowhere to go. And so it really just becomes a more comfortable time. And then also if you're driving, you're not as focused on what you're going to say, and so it could come out more naturally. The next is using the media to start a conversation. So I attended this session earlier about consent in movies and TV, and I loved it so much because that's a part of this workshop as well, of looking at TV and movies and how we use these media pieces to start conversations and to have, even if it's a negative example, about bringing that up and talking about why it's a negative thing. The next is to talk about your own thoughts and values. You are the person to instill your own values into your young people. It's not anywhere else. And so you want them to really hear that from you. And finally, listen, do not lecture. We want to listen and really hear what our teens are saying, try to have empathy. And it's really hard to be a teenager. Like, I would not go back if I could. So it's so important to just listen and not lecture or talk at them, but rather talk to them and talk with them and make it a conversation. So what is a teachable moment? A teachable moment is any situation where opportunity knocks. So where a child is disposed to learn something or be responsive to be taught something or become aware of something. So this could be spontaneous, where the youth initiate the conversation and ask a question or tell you about something that happened at school or something they saw on TV, and they kind of want your input on it. Or it could be prompted, where you see something on TV or you see a TikTok or an Instagram post and you initiate the conversation using something else as kind of a jumping point. So whenever we're thinking about those youth-initiated teachable moments, we want youth to know that we have regular and open communication with parents and other trusted adults. So we don't want this to be like just a one-time talk and this is the only time we're going to focus on it. We want it to be an open conversation and an ongoing conversation. We want it to be honest and realistic. So they do not want just like some Googled answer, because we know that they could probably Google anything. But they want to have this conversation with their parent. They want, or their trusted adult. They want to know what other people think and what other people feel. They want to know that they're not alone. They want to know what the real world is like. They don't want to be underestimated. They don't want people to think, that they're not ready for this conversation. And finally, they don't want to be judged for asking questions. So if they ask a question about a healthy relationship, not for it to be assumed that they're in an unhealthy relationship. Or if they ask a question about sex, not for it to be assumed that they're having sex with their partner. So we're going to look at some teachable moments and using these as kind of a jumping point. So the first is a commercial on TV. So you can tell me in the chat box if you would use this conversation or this video to start a conversation with the young person. And if so, how would you do that? If my moderator could read the chat box answers to me, please, because I cannot see it. Or I could get out of this. Oh no, okay, it appears that there was some difficulty with the sound with the video, so I apologize for that. It was the Gillette commercial that talks about Gillette's kind of saying is the best a man can get. And so it says like, it starts out kind of with the Me Too movement. And so it's saying like to encourage men to be better and to encourage their friends to be better. It got a lot of media coverage and there were people on both sides and some were saying like, not all men are like this. And then other people were saying like, wow, I love this commercial because it's a great example and it's encouraging. So there was a lot of backlash about it. But if you were to use it as a teachable moment, either way you stand, whether you think that it is portraying that all men are like this or whether you think that it is encouraging for men, you could use either as a teachable moment. We have in the chat box, I would ask young people what they think about boys fighting as a way to problem solve. I love that. Yes. So someone else says I would teach not all boys to fight, or I would teach that not all boys fight. Absolutely. Yeah. So we could talk about different conflict resolution techniques, or what do we do whenever we get angry? Do we hit? What do we need to do to cope with that anger, to deal with that anger? Do we need to just kind of go sit by ourselves, or do we need to color? Do we need to walk? We need to run and kind of get off some of that steam. So this could be a great way to talk about personally how to calm down and get that anger out, and how your young person does that best. We're going to skip over that one since the sound isn't working on the videos, but that one was from This Is Us, and they do kind of like a little circle, and they all say something that they're thankful for. They kind of do like a highs and lows thing, and I really love that because they're not like sitting at a dinner table, which is where it's seen a lot, but they're just like standing on a basketball court. And one person is saying that their low has been moving to a new place, and their parent had no idea that they were feeling that way. And so it gave them a safe space and a safe environment to really tell what they were really feeling and what their lows were. And so using small rituals or games or things like that to say, what's the best part about your day? Or what was the worst part? You know, how were you feeling throughout your day? Or you could do it on a weekly basis, but just using something as a check-in can help start these conversations and to create a safe space and become an askable adult. So if we want to use these teachable moments, and it's probably more comfortable if our young people come to us with their questions, and that way we know that the information we're giving them is what they want to know. So then we need to be askable. We need to be the adult that they could come to. So we're going to look at what that means and how to become askable, and then why that's even important. So being askable just means that young people see you as approachable. So it helps teens make positive choices about their own health and safety by having an adult that they can go to ask questions or to get advice. It also helps teens delay sexual initiation, use contraceptives, and learn what to look for in a relationship. So like we talked about earlier with those myths versus facts, having an adult that they can go to really helps them make those healthier decisions and be less likely to engage in risky behaviors, because teens want parental or adult guidance. I know we think that they just want to be free and do whatever they want, but they want those boundaries because that means that someone loves them and wants to keep them safe. So whenever we think about this, we know that adults worry about not knowing the answers or giving too much information or giving the information at the wrong time. But research finds that youth with the least accurate information about sexuality and risky behaviors experiment more. And when teens are able to talk to an adult, they're less likely to engage in those risky behaviors. So sometimes you might feel like, why me? Why are you coming to me with this? Why are you talking to me about this right now? Like, you know, if you're thinking about work or you're stressed about another family situation and your child's coming to you with these questions that you kind of have to think about how to answer, or they're kind of shocking. And then you start wondering, like, why are they asking this? What's going on in their life? They're asking these because you're their role model. They don't have a lot of resources. And it's great because you can actually help guide them into making those healthy decisions. So let's look at some door slammers versus door openers. So a door slammer is something that whenever your child asks you a question, that you respond with either, you don't need to know that, or why are you asking that? Are you having sex? Or we'll talk about that when the time comes. So you're not answering the question, you're shutting them down, and it makes it a lot less likely that they'll ever come to you with another question, because if you didn't give them an answer the first time, why are they going to come to you again? So we want to respond with door openers. So we could say, that's a great question. What do you think about that? So really kind of turn it back on them. Or you could say, I'm not really sure, but I'll try to find out for you. So that validates them knowing that, oh, I had a good question that even my adult doesn't know the answer to. So that can help them feel, I know when I ask a question and someone who I think is supposed to have all the answers doesn't know, I'm like, oh, I'm really smart. I had a great question that someone else had never even thought of before. So it kind of gives them that confidence. And if you find out for them, go back and tell them, hey, I went and looked this up and this is what I came up with. Or you could do it together. If you do it together, that could create a great opportunity to teach safe online habits. So, how do we know that this is a trusted website? How do we know that this one does not look like one that we want to click on, that sort of thing, and teach them those safety tips. So we asked some parents and some youth serving professionals, what is the most shocking question you've been asked by a young person? And here are some of their responses. Someone asked, why am I in foster care? Another said, why is there so much violence? Another said, is it true that you can't get pregnant if you have sex standing up? Someone said, had a 13-year-old male ask when he was going to get his period. Another said, why do old people have sex? And then finally, why are you wearing a wig when you have hair? So some of them are funny, and some of them are like, I don't know how to answer this. And some of them are sad and heartbreaking, and we also don't know how to answer them. So there are 4 basic types of questions, and if we know what kind of question it is, then it helps us figure out how to answer it. So the first are information-seeking questions. These are just straightforward questions that have specific factual answers. So how does a condom work? Well, it prevents sperm from entering the vagina, and that prevents the egg from being fertilized. Okay. Or what is rape? That is, unwanted penetration. So it could just be a question that has a definition. There are also, am I normal questions? So these questions, they happen a lot during puberty, whenever no one knows what's happening with their own body. Everyone's bodies are changing at a rapid rate, but all at different times than their friends. And they just want some reassurance that they're normal, that they're okay, that these weird feelings are okay. Another example might be if they ask, this happened in my relationship. Is that a red flag? Is this something that I should be worried about? This kind of made me feel weird. So is my relationship normal? And there are also permission or advice seeking questions. So these are a young person is trying to make a decision, and they want permission to make the decision that probably they want to make. So if your young person says, what is the correct age to have sex? They're probably asking permission for their current age, or if they ask when you had sex, how old were you? And so they're wanting just kind of some advice or some permission. And so then we can give them that information and instill our own values. And finally, there are those questions that are to understand what we as a household value and what we believe. So if your young person says, how old were you when you had sex for the first time? And this is also a great time to explore and to explain that other people have different values, and that's okay. So you could say, in our house, this is what we believe. Other people believe this, just so they know that this is a belief, which means that it's not a fact and there's not just one answer. It's different to every person and in every experience. So how do we answer these questions that are shocking or that we kind of don't know how to answer? So we have a little formula and just 6 simple steps, and it'll just kind of give you a little gateway to answer the question so that you're not just like spinning everything around in your brain trying to figure out what to say. So the first step is to affirm your young person's question. So that's being that door opener statement. So that could be, well, I'm so glad that you came to me with that question. The next is state the facts. So if it's if they asked, what is rape? You just tell them the definition. You could explore the range of values and beliefs. So with something like rape, there is not a range of values. You could tell them it is never okay. You could even emphasize consent. So depending on the age could depend on what you're going to add into this conversation. You would then applaud your young person for coming to you with that question. So another sort of door opener, and say, thanks so much for asking. If you don't know the answer, just be honest. Hey, I'm not really sure what the definition is. Let's look it up. Let's Google it. Or, hey, I know this great domestic violence website. I bet they have a definition on it. And then finally, remain available and see if you answered the question. So just, hey, did that answer your question? Do you have any other questions about this? And that helps us know if we have that fear that we're going to give too much information. We just answer what they asked. And if they have more questions, then they'll come back to us if we're being an askable adult and if we make ourselves available with these door openers.
Excuse me, Alex.
Yeah.
There's a question about timing from a parent. What is a good time to talk?
Timing as in, so if it's like a situation or if it's an age. So if it's a situation, you could talk whenever you're in the car is a great time. You're kind of trapped. And so you don't have that, like, they might run away or they're super distracted. So the car is great. Another time is whenever your child is doing something else, like cleaning their room. Hey, let's like clean your room together and we'll talk about this. And that way it's more mindless. So they're still getting information, but you're not just sitting like face to face at the dinner table, making it more awkward and making both of you overthink everything you're going to say. So it just makes it that more natural conversation whenever there's another activity involved, if that makes sense.
As for that, there's a second part to the question. And that is, how can a parent get them to understand that they really want to discuss the issue with them?
That they really want to what? I'm sorry.
Discuss any issues with them.
How can the parent
get the teenager to understand that they want to discuss issues with them?
Okay. So I think especially if you haven't grown up having these conversations, and especially if it wasn't modeled in your own household, it can seem kind of awkward, especially if you're starting this as a teenager. So really using these jumping points, so whether it's a TikTok that you know is really popular or a song that you know is really popular, you could just use that as like a, hey, let's have a conversation about this, and start small. Like, don't start with something that's going to be super sensitive and awkward. But if you haven't been making yourself available and you haven't been being an askable adult, it's never too late. So you could start by just saying, hey, I'm here if you have any questions about any of this, or let's talk about this TikTok that I saw. Have you seen this? Like, what do you think about it? What do your friends think about it? If you see a scene on TV or a commercial, asking those questions. So I loved in a session that I attended earlier, the one that was about decoding consent in the media, they used Frozen. And so at the end, Kristoff is like, he kind of says accidentally, like, oh, I could kiss you right now. And then he's like, oh, wait, well, can I kiss you? I'd like to kiss you. And I'd never thought of that as a consent scene. And now that I think about it, I'm like, of course. And so that's really cool. So you could even use like something as small as Frozen to talk about consent. And it's not awkward. That scene was very realistic. It kind of slipped out of his mouth and he's just saying, is this okay if I kiss you? And she's like, yes, I would love to kiss you. And so then they kiss and it was so cute. So really using small things and using things that your teens are going to already relate with is a great way to let them know that you're trying to talk to them about these issues. Are there any other questions before we quickly go over our parent toolkit? Okay. So because we have all of these questions about how do we talk, when do we talk, what do we say, what's age appropriate, we at GCAP came up with what we call a parent toolkit. And so it's just a communication guide, and it includes topics on everything. So without parents' permission sounds a little scary, but it talks about Georgia's reproductive health, minors' reproductive health laws, and what minors can get and what they can expect at their healthcare center, at their clinic, and what they can do without their parents' permission. There are some, and all of these just include a short one-pager. So it doesn't give you so much information that it's overwhelming. It just gives you enough to start the conversation. And if your child has more questions, you can look it up and go and talk to them, research it together, whatever that looks like for your family. There are some on protests and race and social injustice, and those include some on homelessness. There are ones on healthy relationships and teen dating violence. So that kind of talks about what to look for in your teen, what behaviors and when you might need to be worried. There are some on human sexuality, and that includes like an age chart of 0 to 3. This is what's important, or this is what you should say. And it goes all the way up. There are some on peer pressure and digital drama. There's some on bullying, of what to do if your child's a bully or if they get bullied. There's some on how to listen and how to learn. So that's a lot about how to be an askable adult. Then there are also some statistics, and those are just more random things like vaping and things like that. So you can go to gcap.org/toolkit, and that has our whole toolkit. So it includes all of these, and then this is what it looks like on your phone. And so we also have the ability to add anything. So if you look at it and you see, well, I was really looking for this topic and they didn't have it, you can email parents@gcap.org and we'll research and we'll create a one-pager and add it for you. Or if you're a youth serving organization and you have information that you would like us to include, we can do that as well. We also have an app called TMI Georgia, and it's mainly about sex ed, but it has accurate information about birth control, STDs. There's a clinic locator so that people can know where to get tested or where to get low cost or free birth control. There's also an anonymous question where people can ask questions and they'll have a health professional answer that question so they'll know that they have accurate information. So that's available on the Google Play and the Apple App Store. Are there any additional questions? Well, thank you all so much. Here's my email address, alexandra@gcap.org. If y'all have any questions or you need more information or you have questions about the toolkit, I'll be happy to answer them. And you can feel free to email me. So hope y'all have a great rest of your day.